This creepy incident happened years ago when I used to commute to work by train. I was working late a lot back then, so I often took the last train home. There's something eerie about empty stations late at night. They're usually full of people, but after midnight, they feel abandoned and you get a totally different vibe. So it was a Friday night, and I'd been stuck at the office until past 11. By the time I got to the station, it was almost midnight. The platform was completely empty, except for a couple of dim overhead lights. I didn't think much about the emptiness at the time. It was late, and most people probably took earlier trains. I was standing waiting for the train when I noticed the electronic display that usually showed the train times went blank. I figured maybe it was out of order, so I checked my phone to confirm the time of the last train, and it said it was due in about 10 minutes. So I stood there, scrolling through my phone, waiting. A little more time had passed when out of the corner of my eye, a man appeared on the far end of the platform. He must have walked up from the stairwell, but I didn't hear him approach at all. It startled me because I was sure I'd been alone. He was wearing this old brown coat and a hat pulled down low so I couldn't really see his face. He was just standing there, not moving. I tried to brush it off. It's a public station. People can be weird sometimes, but something about him made me feel uneasy. I kept glancing in his direction, but he wasn't moving. Just standing, staring straight ahead. I decided to try and not creep myself out, so I didn't look at him anymore. I just focused on my phone. A few minutes passed, and I was starting to feel a bit of ease when I heard the faint scraping of shoes against the ground. I looked up, and the man had taken a few steps closer to me, but he still wasn't looking directly at me. His head was slightly down, and he was walking slowly, dragging his feet in a way that seemed deliberate. My heart started racing. The man's behavior was definitely strange. Something about his presence didn't feel right. I told myself to try stay calm, that it was probably just some harmless weirdo. But the station was completely empty except for the two of us, and the last train still hadn't arrived. I kept watching him out of the corner of my eye, not wanting to make it obvious that I was nervous. He was closer now, maybe 20 feet away. I thought about moving to the other end of the platform, but I didn't want him to pick up on my body language and appear vulnerable. I glanced over for a second and noticed he had slightly tilted his head, and I caught a glimpse of his face under the dim light. His skin was pale like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. His cheeks were sunken, and he had really dry-looking lips. His eyes seemed emotionless, like there was no life behind them. I was frozen with fear and anxiety, trying to tell myself the train wouldn't be far away, and then I could get away from this creep. I was so uncomfortable at this point, I thought, screw it. I turned and walked toward the other end of the platform. I did my best to hold it together, hoping the whole time he wasn't following me. When I got some good distance between us, I turned around and looked back, only to see the platform totally empty. He was gone. I felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. I hadn't heard him leave. There was nowhere for him to go except the tracks or back down the stairs, and I would have heard either. But the platform was completely empty. I stood there for a few minutes, just staring, waiting for something to happen or to see him show up again. Finally, the train arrived. The loud screeching brakes pulled me back to reality. The doors slid open and I got on. I just wanted to get home and away from the stress of the day. The section of the train I sat in was empty. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease from earlier. I kept telling myself it was nothing but some weird guy who probably left when I wasn't looking. I was almost halfway home now, and staring out the window at the dark buildings rushing by when I noticed the reflection in the glass. My heart sank into my chest with intense fear. It was the man from the station, and he was sitting in the seat directly behind mine, just staring like before, his face inches from the back of my head with those blank, empty eyes. The panic setting in made it feel like I couldn't breathe or move. I stared at the reflection, paralyzed, trying to understand how he had gotten on the train without me seeing him, and why he had followed me. I felt terrified but mustered all the courage I had and turned around, but the seat was empty. No one was there. The man had completely vanished. I didn't know what to think. I felt a weird mix of pure adrenaline from the fear, yet my mind was racing to rationalize what I just experienced. The rest of that night just felt like a weird blur. I didn't remember much else till I got home. Probably from all the adrenaline. I didn't sleep much that night, or the night after, and I started taking buses to work. I knew they took even longer, but I didn't care. No way will I ever go back to that station at night.